Hey guys, today we will be doing a video on selection and evolution which belongs to A-level biology syllabus code 9700, and we will be concerning ourselves with most of the learning outcomes about selection and evolution, topic 17. And there are like 3 divisions of this topic: variation, natural and artificial selection, and evolution. So let's start with basics. Variation. What is basically variation? Variation is basically the differences found within a population or between populations, etc., etc. And the variation between the species is pretty obvious. A dog and a cat are different species. And you don't need to be a rocket scientist in order to be able to distinguish the two. They are clearly different morphologically, that is, their shape, their appearance is completely distinct. Physiologically, they are different as well. And they have clear, distinct behavioral differences. A dog chases after a cat, but a cat will never chase after a dog. Cats have some sort of obsession with rodents and birds because to them that is prey, but it is unlikely that a dog will chase after a rodent. And they're completely different. They have different predators, they have different preys, they behave extremely differently to the same stimulus. They have different mating habits, and the way they mate is also different because they are morphologically different. Dogs and cats, they have different periods in which they will be in heat, and so on and so on. But perhaps something that some of you may not have noticed, and that is there is a lot of variation within a population of the same species as well. And in some cases, this variation is hell of a lot more obvious. In human beings, even within one family, when comparing 5 siblings, there's definitely a lot of variation. They may have slightly different skin tones. Some of them would be slightly taller, may have different intelligence levels, so that is a bit difficult to measure, etc. Some of them may have freckles, some may have a dimple. However, comparing 5 siblings with 5 unrelated people, the differences will be much more extreme. Whereas it is likely that all 5 siblings have the same hair color, the same eye color. Chances are that when we compare them with 5 unrelated people, one would be a redhead, the other would be blonde, the third would have black hair, and the fourth might be an albino. So basically, whereas variation will be found within closely related people, those variations will be much more distinct when comparing people who are not related, or at least distantly related. And this is a lot to do with the concept of a gene pool and the concept of variation. And in humans, this variation is pretty distinct. However, when we compare cats, which are all a species, and we compare two different species, or in dogs, which is basically one complete species, if we were to compare a German Shepherd with a golden retriever, there is a hell of a lot of difference. And that difference would be even more extreme, even more visible if we were to compare either of them with a poodle. And why, in the case of a dog, are those variations so extreme that at a layman, someone who does not have a lot of knowledge about biology may even have the misconception that a Chihuahua, a poodle, and a German Shepherd are different species. They are not. And that is this extreme variation has something to do with selective breeding, and we will be going over this in this chapter as well. So what is a gene pool? The gene pool for a particular population in a particular area for a particular species is the available alleles. All the available alleles. So let's assume that for a particular species there is only one gene on a chromosome that is responsible for eye color. And let's say, as for those of you who are familiar with genetics, they should know that the same species will possess the same genes. All of their cells will possess the same genetic material, in the sense that they will possess the same genes at the same positions. They would have the same number of chromosomes, and those genes would all be located in the same position. For example, for a particular species, the gene for eye color for all of them would be present on chromosome number 2 at the same position. However, what is different is that while the genes themselves are different, they may be slightly altered, slight variation in their nucleotide sequence. For example, a nucleotide sequence of 2000 base pairs may have one base pair not present, and so the sequence would be slightly differed. And because of that, we have different forms of the same gene. And for the eye color hypothetical example we are talking about, let's say that there are 5 varied genes for eye color. So whereas all of the members of the species would possess the gene for eye color, the alleles that they possess could be different. And another thing to remember is that a diploid organism always possesses 2 copies of the same gene. So they would possess 2 copies of the gene for eye color, and each copy would be present on a chromosome. So basically we would have 2 copies of chromosome 3, and each would possess the gene. And as I said, there are a lot of varieties of a gene, and it isn't necessary that we would have the same allele on the 2 copies of chromosome 3. They would be identical, the copies, in that they would possess the same genes. So where were we? Alright, so basically for a particular member, given that they would have 2 copies of the same gene, one copy may be allele type A and the other could be allele type B. Remember I said that hypothetically 5 different alleles could be allele A and allele A, could be allele A and B, could be B and C, could be C and D, could be A and D, could be, so there could be hell of a lot of variety. And the thing is that usually not just one gene is responsible for a particular trait, and that causes even more variation. So let's talk about a gene pool. Alright, so we're only talking about a particular gene. So we will only be involving all the different variations. So the same gene, this is allele 1, this is allele 2, this is allele 3, this is allele 4, and this is allele 5. And so basically these are the same genes and they're coding for exactly the same trait. However, how they're coding will be different. So we were talking about eye color, weren't we? So for example, if we had 2 of this, we could have brown color. If we could have 1 of this and 1 of this, we could still have brown color because this would be dominant in a hypothetical situation. And for this to be expressed, that is, let's say yellow eye color, I'm being hypothetical, it could either be 2 of these or 1 of this and 1 of this, because while this is recessive to this, this is dominant to this one. So this is a gene pool for a particular gene, and there's a lot of variety present. So how does variation occur? So what is the main reason for variation between a species? And that is sexual reproduction. And why is that? Well, because let's talk about human beings. Damn it, reproduction. I'm terrible at this. So we have 23 pair of chromosomes in a mature human, right? So basically in total 46 chromosomes or 23 homologous pairs. And the homologous pairs, basically they have the same genes but not necessarily the same alleles. And so what happens during sexual reproduction is that we basically produce gametes. And how does that happen? Well, let's say this is a diploid cell, all right, and we are basically talking about a particular animal species which just has two set of chromosomes, meaning, so both of these, this pink one and this red one, are the same chromosome, meaning they are both chromosome 1. All right, and this is chromosome 2, and the other one which I'm going to draw is also chromosome 2. Here the difference is that this one was originally inherited by this person from the father, both of these, or not necessarily both of these, but because we are representing the red ones with the paternal, and this one was inherited from the mother. And when gametes are formed, we basically get gametes, and this has to do with meiosis 1 and meiosis 2. What could we get? We'd get 4 cells, all right. I don't think I made this clear enough. So to make it clear, let's use this yellow over here. and this yellow over here, alright, to differentiate the homologous pairs, right? So basically we have this whole gamete thing being produced, and this would be and this, okay, and right, this could be this, right? And then you'd also have this, right, because these are chromatids. Right. So there is a lot of possibility. And why is there a lot of possibility, and why did we get this and this over here? But another possibility would have been that we would have gotten this and this, and another possibility we would have gotten this, and we would have gotten one from this. There's a lot of variety because this has to do with something called independent assortment. Alright, so there is literally no rule for which of the two homologous chromosomes, or which genetic material from either of the homologous chromosomes gets into a particular gamete. This is all independently sorted. We could have a set of 23 chromosomes, meaning we would have a total of 46, and in a particular gamete we would have just a total of 23, and which of the 23, whether the maternal or the initially paternal gets in there, is completely by chance. So there is a hell of a lot of possibilities of the genetic material that would be contained in the gamete. The genetic material itself might not necessarily be changed unless there is mutation, but there is a hell of a lot of recombination going on because we don't know which parts we would get. And another thing is that we just don't, while this does in itself contain a lot of possibilities, because there is literally, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of possibilities based on the chromosomes getting distributed, because in humans we have like 23, so there's a lot of variation. And something else happens, and that is crossing over. And what is that? Because basically homologous pairs, they do something called crossing over, in which they attach to each other at certain points. Forgive me, this one. And basically they attach to each other at certain points, and their genes, they basically get swapped. Basically this crossing over, which is yet another random process, leads to even more variation, because genetic material is swapped randomly from one chromosome of the homologous pair, from one non-sister chromatid to the other. And that creates even more variation, because there will be